Sweet.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are joined by Henry, who is our only reactionary in the Discord server.
Yeah, I've been around for a while. I don't know. I feel like all the new people are kind of dissuaded by my presence, but
Yeah, somebody left a while ago, and they're like, "I was sick of being the only anti-fascist in a server with fascists in it." It's like, okay, I wouldn't just throw that word around so readily, but
you're all fascists. You know it. You're all based deep down. Anyway, off the topic of fascism.
yeah. So you're into Ted K, you're into Nick Land, you're into like
Yeah, I mean, so Ted K, he's a little recent. I got into his works because I don't know, a friend was talking about him, and he mentioned that he had like some sort of manifesto, and but he called it like a bunch of like mumble like junk stuff, and I was like, I'm gonna check it out, and so I read it, and I was Ted Pill. That's the moment I became Ted Pill, basically. Yeah, and then Nick Land. I mean, his only works that I really do like are probably The Dark Enlightenment. Other than that, I mean, I really couldn't say I like a whole lot of Nick Land's work, but
is that all you've read by him?
I've read snippets of other things. But I've checked his Twitter, and it, Jesus, I don't know. There's so much there.
He
I don't want
hasn't
to get into,
tweeted in a
but
while. People are worried about him.
yeah, no. I hope he's okay.
um the time lemurs finally got to him, I guess. I don't know.
I hope Ted's okay too. He's just chilling in prison.
Yeah, free our boy. So what do you
No.
like cuz to put this into context, you used to be an ANCAP before this.
I
So
used to be pretty hardcore libertarian, yeah.
I just wanted to like get into your political evolution. So just
Yeah,
describe
so
to
like
us why you changed the way you did and what happened.
so I didn't like I started getting into politics when I was like a couple years ago, and I was like right before COVID started. And I was like, oh, okay. So what's this Trump guy? He seems all right. And so I was like, I was identifying kind of with the Republican Party, but there was always like something wrong with it all. And I was like very hesitant to actually go all in. But I was generally supportive of like center right, like obviously like liberal policies, but at the time they were kind of right wing to me.
Yeah.
But and then I don't know. Later on, I guess I got more into like economics and stuff, and that introduced me to like Milton Friedman, all like the classical liberals, and I guess that was the descent into libertarianism. And I guess that's when I joined this server, I think. But and
Yeah.
then I don't know. From there, I picked up like Hans Hermann Hoppe stuff like that, and I started getting more like deeper philosophical literature and stuff, like instead of just basic, liberalism 2.0 stuff. And I don't know. I just went from there.
That makes sense. It starts with Hoppa cuz he's like the reactionary ANCAP really.
He's kind of like a bridge between the two
Yeah.
things. Yeah, I can't really say that they're actually that compatible, but I mean, I guess he does kind of a good job at conceptualizing it.
Well, he's the physical removal guy, which is
He is the physical removal guy,
which
and
is
I
like
mean,
horrifying to think about for me.
I mean, I don't think it's all that crazy. I mean, what do you do if someone's on your in your property or something? You got to get them out, right? What do you do?
But isn't it
Physically
like
remove them?
leftists and people who believe in democracy and like whoever the community finds to be like an undesirable person?
Well, I think what he because so his idea of a covenant community, as far as I remember it, is really like a collection of people who have neighboring properties, sort of, and you can also collectively own the road that you guys use or whatnot. But that the idea is that there is no foreign property inside of that. It's all owned by them. And so any invader outside is technically in the wrong because they don't have any property inside of there.
Okay. See,
If I remember correctly.
how all of it hinges on this concept of property is just so.
Yeah, that was my problem with it. That's kind of what dissuaded me. It's kind of like it's probably the problem with the Enlightenment as well. I mean, it kind of just hinges on these abstract ideas of equality, liberty, and property and freedom and all those things. Like, they don't actually really mean a whole lot.
Yeah, especially when they don't fulfill themselves in practice. Like in the actually existing liberal society, those Enlightenment values are not fulfilled. It's like an impossible goal almost.
It's like a what is it? It's like a piece of food at the end of a fishing rod, and you're just constantly chasing it, and
Yeah.
it's like you can never gonna get to that. And it's so weird because it sort of acts as a replacement for religion, which was something that was actually fulfilling to individual human beings. Then this is just like a hellscape, an industrial hellscape.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. Like these lefties, like these lib types that I like constantly am arguing with on Twitter and shit. It's like they don't they just don't get it. Like they just live in this like fantasy world. Like
They're under a spell. It's like the that is their world.
everything
They
just
can't think outside of
becomes
it.
individual moralistic group condemnation, like circular firing squad, like in constant policing of yourself.
And it's not even. It's like a complete denial of like your actual needs in life, in replacement of like some materialistic, vague goal. You know, whether that be like money or whatever, fame.
Yeah, and like
Surrogate activities is what I would call them.
consumer produced desires and identities, like people who are
Exactly.
just fans of franchises and they're like that's their whole life is just that.
Yeah. But I mean, I think this sort of is filling a hole, like a void, where a lot of like our previous lifestyles left during the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, and
Like
it's yeah.
like ideology, for example, usually the only kind of thing that could resemble ideology was like your spirituality, religion. Usually, you worship your ancestors, and that had no impact on the environment around you. It was a purely personal thing. But I feel like we sort of look for that in materialistic things on the outside world. But yeah, so that was kind of an observation I had.
That makes sense.
Uh, you know,
Um but it's like what you were saying about all the old ways of life that these are like replacements for. It's
yeah,
I think I don't know if you would agree, but that's the process of history as directed by capitalism because it deterritorializes all of the old categories, all of the old conceptions of human existence, and then they get re-territorialized by other sort of cultural forces, but it's never really the whole thing that was destroyed in the first place.
I could agree with that. Though I will say the Industrial Revolution or industrial capitalism sort of would not have been able to have the devastating effects it had if the Enlightenment hadn't set up the infrastructure, like the global mindset, to put that in place in order for industrial progress to take place. So I
Hmm.
do think that there is some value in taking a look at the Enlightenment and all its values and how they linger today, especially with uh, neo Enlightenment things like the sexual revolution, stuff like that. especially with more progressive movements as well, sort of stemming from the Enlightenment. I think we should also, yeah, take a look at those a little deeper.
See, this is probably where we would start to disagree because it's like I almost enjoy that. Like as someone who's more Marxist, like cuz Marx thought that progressive end of capitalism was a good thing, like of the destruction of the and like Deleuze and like that they were almost seeing that end of this era as a way where you could find some kind of liberation in it. And I think you're more like socially conservative, like
Maybe, and I think and I don't think there's any point in trying to enforce a way of life on people, especially if you already know that the Industrial Revolution and all that stuff was bad. I don't think you're going to make any attempt to nationally ban some sort of sexual behavior or deviancy. And I think it really comes down to how individual people choose to live their lives independent of the state and the capitalist infrastructure as it stands. Sort of like a personal living off the grid sort of thing, if you know what I mean. I think you should take value in the way you live your life and stop focusing on others and try to come together with like-minded people as well if you really want that sort of solidarity and personal values.
yeah, that definitely makes sense for like any kind of person even.
Yeah. And I mean, I think people should have freedom to associate with whoever they want, you know. I mean, I think that's kind of an inevitable thing. Like, I think if you're Christian or Jewish or whatever, like, definitely be neighbors with someone who thinks the same. I think that's definitely good for social cohesion. But I'm not going to advocate for going out and hunting people based on their personal doctrine or how they live.
Yeah, that's
But
definitely good. Especially since we're
yeah,
online right now. But
yeah,
um a lot of people seem to think like they see all of this sort of political polarization and people getting all territorial and they just think, well, since we are neighbors, like even if we completely disagree, we should just be able to get along and like kumbaya and all of this. Like what do you think about that kind of like what do you think about those types of like lib people who see themselves as pacifistic and like loving, but really they're just sort of standing on the status quo and being like, I'm okay with
yeah.
this. Like,
I see a lot of those kind of people, and it's I don't know. I feel like they're kind of in a place materially where they're just comfortable enough to like not want to do anything, but
yeah,
also not comfortable enough to kind of feel disillusioned with the society they live in. I don't know. I
yeah,
feel like
yeah.
that's the majority of people. That's the middle class, and I feel like there's kind of purposeful
Those
to
are the
have that.
herd animals. Like, yeah, those are the Biden people.
Yeah, I mean Trump people too. Honestly, at
Yeah,
least class ones. A lot of them are also pretty poor rural area people, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like also the sort of generational divide between these sort of liberal types, especially as newer generations get more liberal, I feel like there's going to be a group of people they're always like throughout the next like 50 years that are going to be conservative, but 10 years before they were progressive. So it's going to be a constant like generational divide, and there's going to be no like family unity because of that. And I think that's a major harmful thing that liberalism has brought on the family
that's
as well.
interesting. So, what do you see as a sort of like, if you had to make your own political prescriptions, what do you think is like the way forward? What do you see as an alternative to post industrial modernity or like liberal capitalism, however you want to put it?
An alternative, honestly, I think the best steps we should take is to remove at least large scale technologies in most aspects of our life, and we can live more rural lives. We can live much more naturalistic lives, free of fast food, free of technology, free of urban areas, overcrowded urban areas. I think definitely that improvement in how we live will be an automatic net benefit. But I also think the ideal system of organization, if we're going to get to that, is probably something of a monarchical, maybe tribal system, feudal, you might even say.
Okay, that part is especially interesting because, like, those are two very different systems. Like a primitive tribal setting versus like a despotic state machine. Like those are very different things.
Well, feudalism. What kind of feudalism are you thinking about?
Like you have a king or like a central ruler, and everything is kind of subordinated to that individual and the idea of the god that rules through them, supposedly, like that kind of. Is that what you mean?
Well, that's a very like specific ideology within the history of monarchism, if you get what I mean.
Okay.
And so it's because with monarchy it also depends on the person, right? Because it's one person ruling. Um, it also depends very much on the people that they're ruling, how many people they're ruling, how big the geographical size is. If they have if the family of the monarch is very much strongly connected to, you know, the average citizen, and it's not just some foreign bloodline, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
That adds more of a sense of not democracy. I think it's more of like a people's inclusion into the ruling power.
Okay,
But
so like some kind of cultural unity has to be included.
cultural unity, yeah, under the king or queen. I would probably prefer that to be Christian, or at least on some level spiritual.
Okay.
I don't believe there's any room for secular or atheistic morality.
All right. That's interesting too because I see the same things as far as like deterritorialization and reterritorialization happening on the field of morality as well, where you have people who are like, "Oh, I don't believe in God, but I still believe in objective morals." And it's like, "Okay, you're basically doing the same thing then." Like that doesn't.
You're not any different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very ideological phenomenon. It's like really not a whole lot of actual pragmatic action happening.
True. These people do
Yeah,
nothing.
like they just sit around and think they're intellectuals and they're doing something. That's peak liberalism, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and like they think that their consumer choices individually will like save the world, and if you don't live exactly like them, you're a horrible person. That's literally how they think.
Exactly. If you don't feed into the very system that enslaves you, then you're a bum, you're a high school dropout, you're a leech, whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's really just the buying of the sheep. I don't really take it as anything serious.
Yeah. It just frustrates me because these people call themselves socialists and it's like, okay.
Yeah. Oh my god. Every time I hear someone say they're like a democratic socialist, I have to walk out of that room because oh my god. Oh my god. And also like people who call themselves conservatives. It's like here's my problem with conservatism. Like modern conservatives, right?
Okay.
So conservatives, especially more recent ones like Trump supporters, they'll like enthusiastically like support like all this technological progress, and they'll support all these like capitalistic policies that will drastically increase the GDP or some shit. And then they'll also complain about the decay of like their conservative values and stuff, even though the capitalistic policies which they support are like the exact same ones that are causing them to rot away. It's yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, Ted Kaczynski wrote a good bit on that. I don't know. I've read through his manifesto quite a lot, but
All right. Well, do you want to talk about like that sort of primitivism or like anti-tech decelerationist kind of like? Because I don't know if I agree with that. Like, I used to be more tending towards that side of the like imprims versus like transhumanist debate,
yeah.
but now it's like honestly, I just got more deeper into Marxism and I put it together that like technological advancement doesn't have to be corrosive for society and contribute to the enslavement of man by man. That's just because of the capitalist system that undergirds that technological advancement. And if we put technology like to the use of people as a collective, of humanity as a collective, then in that universe, we could literally use it to reduce the workday time. We could use it to and then raise wages while we and use automation, which everyone is so afraid of because it will kill jobs under capitalism. Under socialism, we could use it to free people of labor. That's my perspective on it. So it's like if we change the economic system in a revolutionary fashion, then technological revolutions would end up being positive things in all of the ways that they're negative in today's world. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think you have to view industry and its inclinations on a wider scale. I don't think it's necessarily the capitalistic sort of model put in place. I think industry is self-growing, and no matter what you try to do, you can slow it down. Like I do think that if a socialism were like to be put in place, a kind of socialism, I think it would slow it down, but I don't think it can be halted, mainly because there is finite resources and industry is ever expanding. And especially with an ever growing population, eventually you're going to not be able to slow it down and it's going to get to that point where there's nothing else you can do, and either we'll all go extinct or there will be no like natural organism left on Earth.
Okay, so you basically think that we're headed towards that Landian singularity regardless of what we try to do, basically. Is that your position?
Well, I think that's a possibility. I think it could go also some other. I think it could collapse as well, but I think industry in itself brings about circumstances that seek infinite growth, even though we are on a finite planet.
Well,
It's
is it industry itself or is that a feature of capitalism? That it has this
well, what
dream
is
of infinite growth that it
industry?
can't possibly achieve without destroying itself. Because that's what Marx was saying.
Yeah, so what does industry give us currently, and what would it give us under a socialist system? It would give us food, right? Obviously, even if we cut out all like the consumerist product, the stuff we don't need, if it's just giving us food and it's building us houses, it's helping us gather resources, and assuming that we don't use eugenics, the population is going to be expanding at an upwards rate. It's not going to be stagnant or slowing down at all. It's going to be going up forever. And with that expansion comes overcrowding. It comes for more demand to um, harvest resources from the planet. We need to build more infrastructure, and eventually we're going to reach the point where we're at again, and it's going to be still infinite growth, and we're going to reach the same problems that we have. It might be better under a socialist system, but it's still going to happen. But yeah,
Well,
but
it seems like that feature of industry, though, and that like slaving away at the service of industrialism itself is like, so the whole point of trying to pursue communism is freeing humanity from that, like freeing us from those economic concerns. So like, not only would it be gathering resources and food, but like automating all kinds of things that we just find to be like so horrible, and like all of the worst labor in the world would be taken care of by machines, because we would collectively decide like, all right, this needs to happen. None of us want to do that, and we have this standard for ourselves and each other to be like, okay, that's horrifying. Like no one wants to do that. So then we will put people to work developing the technologies to do all of those things that people always say like, oh, what about this labor? It's like, okay, well, we can have the fucking robots do that. And like do you not, you just, it's like you completely took a black pill out of a Star Trek future. You just, it's the Matrix. Like that's where we're going. Is that the
Well, I think I think it also comes down to, it doesn't matter who's running the industry, as long as the industry is running, it's going to head there. But I do think it can be stopped. I think with carefully planned action, it can be stopped. But I don't think it can be slowed down or harnessed for the good of humanity. I think in its very nature, it doesn't matter who's controlling it. If it's being maintained, it's going to progress forward by work, whether it be workers, like bosses,
and it will
robots,
progress
whatever,
towards our destruction is the
towards the final moments of Earth or humanity. Or and then another way it could go, it could also implode on itself, destabilize. But I think that's probably more likely to happen if we continue on a more capitalistic way. And I hope, honestly, that would happen soon. But I don't know.
wow. I think you'd be surprised at the amount of people who are like on the left, like post-left anarchists or like anprims or like all those kind of people who would agree with what you're saying about this. And like accelerationists, like a,
Yeah, in accelerationism, I mean, I feel like I feel like it's kind of a 50-50. Like if we accelerate it, we're directly hurting people who have like nothing to do with it and don't deserve it. But also like it could get us there way faster, but also it might not, and it might just accelerate us to the singularity. But I don't know.
it's a scary thing to think about. Especially with
I know.
Land's predictions. It's like horrible. Like
Yeah, let's. I hope that motivates someone to, I don't know, try to do something, or at least make us independent from it. I don't know.
well, I
Those are
mean,
those are my thoughts.
honestly, I'm thinking maybe a little bit more recent in the future, as long as there's no like imminent ecological catastrophe that just absolutely floods and burns down like everywhere. It seems to be the case that America is in decline as a world power, as an empire, and as a country, as a political system, as a political idea. It's in decline. It's becoming progressively becoming a failure. And
Thank God.
at the same time as that, it also appears to be the case that China is rising. The opposite
Oh
is happening
God.
in China. So, what do you think about like a civilizational East versus West, like half of the world eating the other kind of like more recent
I think it'll
future?
be a little more divided than that. Obviously, if anything, it'll probably be like an east, west, south, north sort of thing. I don't think geographical regions could be that united.
Well, if you
But
think
I do
about it,
think
like China will probably have Africa on their side, Middle East on their side, and South America on their side, because all of those countries suffer from American and like Anglo imperialism and oppose it and help each other in opposing it. So it's like,
well, they also just suffer from a lack of resources in their own country, and they want industry as well, and they see China that they can offer them that, and it's kind of just a bribery thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But China works with countries like they're actually better on the world stage than America or all these Western countries. Like they actually work. They actually negotiate with you instead of just killing your leader and installing a puppet and stealing all of your shit. You know what I mean? Like,
They
but
they negotiate with you until they don't.
but the
But
libs don't
what you're
understand that. They just equalize it. Oh, all states are bad.
well, I think any state that relies on industry and unlimited unpaid workforce, I think is a very uh, it's an institution very much worthy of being torn down. I don't know. And America is one of those. I don't know, any industrial superpower doesn't matter if it's Soviet Russia or fucking the United States or anywhere. I think it's worthy of being torn down.
But isn't it an economic fact of reality, as we've seen throughout history, that you kind of need to industrialize your nation in order to become prosperous and successful? What would you like?
But I don't think we should value prosperity and material wealth at such a high value as we do. I think that came along during the Enlightenment with the loss of spirituality as a whole, and I think it made us much more susceptible to capitalism and consumerism as a whole. Really,
But
I think it's a
because of
wrong
those
step.
economic forces, like you have to feed people, and for all of these poor countries,
You
and you look at their rise, it's like if you have a industrialist command economy, you will probably do pretty well if you don't get deposed and killed.
Well, but the thing is that I don't think people have a responsibility to feed other people. And I think in a pre-industrial sense, right? People used to be very, very much self-sufficient. They had a farm, they had a house that they would pass down generations. And it would be the same for hundreds of years, and people were life was stable, life was simple, you were happy, you had a farm, and you could feed yourself, and you could feed your family. But now, especially in Britain, where the Industrial Revolution started. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Enclosure Act.
Yeah, yeah. The enclosure of the commons. Yes, Marx talks about this. It's literally
Yeah,
capitalism killed that way of life to proletarianize you,
sure.
turn you into a free worker who has to sell their
And,
labor.
and I don't think that making industry like in a socialist type will fix that. I really just think returning to a rural lifestyle will reverse the
But
damage
how do you
caused.
go back? How do you return? How do you reverse history when people are dying?
Well, I think you just at this point I don't think that you can convince the masses to do so. I think you would have to do this on a very personal, small level, like going off the grid, becoming self sufficient. I feel like that's really the only thing you can do if you really want to be like escape this, and you want to be happier, and you want your kids to be happier. I think like that's a good step to take, and you with other like minded people as well, obviously. But I think that's really the only thing you can do at this point. I don't know.
So you basically advocate for like what Tim Pool said that the people who did the French Revolution should do is just go out into the woods and carve out your own little like hovel of a community and just kind of survive as best as you can in the off the grid wilderness. Like,
Live free,
who do
live
you
in
think
free of the state.
who do you think that's even possible for? Like, especially
A
in
lot of
today's
people,
world, like how do you think this will work, honestly?
well, a lot of poor people in America are live in rural areas. Like they live out in the countryside, and I feel like that's much easier to do there. If you have something there, even just like a little bit of land, you can turn that into something. And I definitely think environmental and movements and stuff like that should pop up more that teach people, about self sufficiency and like how you can return to this rural natural life and live off the land is what I'm trying to look for. Yeah, living off the land is what I think should be encouraged, especially with movements and activism. But I don't think a revolution is would be possible in the large scale because I don't think that there will be enough people to do it.
Okay, so basically you're saying if you're a mountain man or if you're like one of these rural families who can sort of start a farm and feed themselves and like homeschool their kids, I guess, and all this kind of thing. Like that is the best option right now because of the technological collapse you see imminently coming, and because of the alienating sort of like socially corrosive effects of that society that they are like disconnected from.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think you got it.
All right. Well, that is a very interesting viewpoint because I don't think it's that uncommon. Like maybe some of the specifics are like more unique, but honestly, like even people who are on the left don't even disagree with this. Like a lot of like
Yeah, they'll agree with me until I start talking about some other things. But yeah, we'll keep it at that.
okay, well, do you want to get into these cuz like I don't know.
Some of them are a little controversial, but I mean, I can get into like, yeah, I don't know. I guess just the consequences of social value, the consequences that the Industrial Revolution has had on social values, and I don't know, just the family unit and religious influence on kids and stuff. I don't know. I feel like that's something that people have disdain for,
That's
and I think
true, but maybe we should have this conversation about these things because I feel like they will get mad at me if I don't challenge you on some of
yeah,
these
I don't
things.
want you to get in trouble. Okay.
So,
Uh, well, give me an example of something you might want to hear about. I don't know.
okay, well, what do you think about what do you think about transgender people?
Okay, the trans people. So I view if the LGBT as a whole, I think is very not it's a very consumerist organization. I think. I think it capitalizes on something that stems from a deeper problem, and I think it encourages very like very unhealthy ways of life, and it sort of makes a mockery of certain kinds of people.
Okay,
And
can you get
overall,
more specific with that?
uh, I think it puts people on a pedestal for something that they don't necessarily have control over, and it sort of gives people, like ordinary people who might think they identify with it, like a very warped sense of inclusion and identity. But I think the ones who identify as trans, I think a lot of them, because the situation varies from each person to person. A lot of them have gender dysphoria, and that's a deeper problem as well, and that shouldn't be glorified or consumed like
Well, what do you mean by
integrated.
glorified? Like, I feel like nobody is really glorifying
Like
anybody's dysphoria.
it's not making it seem like it's something that people suffer with, right? Like internally, I feel like they're sort of putting it out there as a sort of way of like showing their like support in a way. I don't know. It's kind of hard to
Well,
describe.
when people are suffering from something, they tend to support each other, right? Like,
But it's a consumerist organization. It gives birth to like Pride Month, for example. That's a huge like that's
yeah, it's
a huge
completely
corporate
co-opted
thing.
by corporations, but I don't think that means that LGBT people are corporate.
I think they feed into it though,
But
especially.
corporations feed into everything. They have a hold on everything though. Like it's not
Well,
just there's nothing special about the fact that they co-opt gayness.
I think the people, specifically the liberal types who might identify with the LGBT for one reason or another, sort of give validate, maybe not actual money, but they do give validation to these big organizations. But it also, I do think in my personal experience, it depends on the person. And I've met several people who would not match that. But I think overall, I think they just sort of feed into a rather harmful institution.
Well, liberals endorse sort of like mainstream queer culture, let's call it, because they think that that is the full extent of social progress. Like they think that that is big and revolutionary and like, you know what
And
I
it could
mean?
get worse, yeah.
They
And
just
and
have
I
their
feel like,
scope too narrow, in my opinion. Like it's not. They just honestly don't see the full extent of the problem with like how much queerness is sort of still like repressed, and the fact that being a consumer to cater to by corporations is not really liberation. Like it's just not. Like the life that average people in the country live and have lived, like straight white cis men for decades under this system has not been that great. So being equal to them is not liberation, it's just we're all the
but I don't
same
think,
animals.
I think also another problem, maybe not with the libs, but I think specifically with the more like actually deep philosophical leftist types, like so, like the people in your server, like ones who aren't liberals but like actually read stuff but are leftist. I think those who see the Enlightenment as a bad thing also still adhere to its values. Like you claim you want liberation, you want equality, and those are things that were sprung out of the Enlightenment. Before then, there was no importance or value on obtaining this sort of abstract idea of liberation or equality, or with the ANCAPs, it's property rights or what have you. But I think there's a clear, like, I think there's a contradiction there, and I think people should, I don't know, see that these sort of notions of social progress and these calls for forward are not going to fix the problems that we have now. Like
Well,
wanting
yeah,
equality
like
with,
I see the fact that these ideals trick people into thinking that they're solving the whole problem and it's all just going to be fixed when really right underneath their noses people are still suffering for that same reason even though there's like corporate pride events and shit like you know what I mean?
but
Like it is
I
a
do.
false target because as a Marxist, I do believe you have to change the system. You know what I mean? Like it's not just chasing ideals. You have to actually do something materially.
But I don't think you should chase ideals at all. I think that should be out of the picture completely. I think you should be completely pragmatic in how you live your life. And I think these ideals of liberty, equality, and justice, and what have you, I don't think we should try to see them as something that, oh well, maybe they did set up the framework for the industrial revolution, capitalism, all the suffering we have today, but maybe we could turn them into something good, and we can adhere to these values in a better way. But I don't think that's going to work. I think that's only going to make it worse. And I think the very nature of Enlightenment thinking and anything similar to it is inevitably going to be corrupt, and it's a fragile idea.
Okay,
But
well, how do you know that you yourself are not sort of
I don't, honestly. I
embodying
mean,
those same values in some sense? Like you want to be free of the Enlightenment. Am I wrong? Like
I think independence is a better word, but I
okay.
guess you could. So yeah, but I mean, it's not that you shouldn't have desire to have these things if you are in a current situation where that's being taken away from you and has been for a while. But you shouldn't organize your people around these values. These are fragile values. But I think you can seek freedom if you're in a place of slavery.
Yeah,
Like you
well,
could
like
seek.
at the end of the day, it's kind of like people don't really unite around values alone. Like there's always a kind of more core
Well,
fundamental thing that's connecting them.
I do think I do think people are can be united around these things, around values, and I think values correlate heavily with our own morals as well. But I think when your values are shallow and fragile, and they're not based on anything in reality or meaningful. I don't think that sort of order around those ideas is going to last very long, or it's going to be very good, if you know what I mean.
I mean, it
But
seems like you're being kind of vague.
how so? I
I
feel
don't
like
know.
I'm.
It's just
Have I always been like this? I
no.
don't
It's
know.
just kind of like usually. I don't know. I'm doing that thing where I am like trying to read into what you're saying. Maybe that's a
Well,
mistake.
I don't think I have any subconscious messages I'm trying to get out, but I'm not trying to hide my power level or anything. But
Cause like I don't know. I just want to convince you, or like I don't know.
well, I don't think there's a whole lot to I think we agree on the symptoms of this world, but I don't know if we agree with what actions we should take after the potential collapse of it. I don't know.
Yeah, and we might disagree analytically on some of the order of things. Cause
But that's ideological.
I always see like, well, you could call it ideological, or you could just call it a difference of analytical frameworks of
Or that.
perception.
Yeah.
Because like to me, at the end of the day, the political economic system is the fundamental opposition. Like,
Yeah. But I think the most fundamental opposition you can take against the current state or global affair, I think, is learning how to grow a tomato plant and how to start a fire. I think that's the best defense you can take.
so your message is basically individuals should become self-sustaining.
Self-sustaining, and I don't think individual. I think it should
And
be,
yeah, form like
and
autonomous communities, yeah.
yeah, and I think also just should be families going out there. I don't know what good one individual person going out there would do. I mean, you could do it, but I don't know. But yeah,
So it's not this
bring
like scary like Nazi like program you have. You're literally just telling people to fucking go learn how to chop wood. Like
touch some grass. Yeah, pretty much. I don't care who you are or what you do. Just touch some grass every like couple of hours at least.
Do you think
But
that this is sort of like another like off the top of my head question, but do you think that technology itself, like to the point that it's developed at this point, like iPhones and shit and like what we're using to communicate right now, do you think that is sort of like inherently alienating or damaging to the human psyche?
oh, absolutely. In so many ways, I probably would take like 3 hours to go through. I think first of all, with like the digital revolution, uh, I think I think that was really the start. If it wasn't gone before, it was gone at this point. I think like the loss of actual community started there because now you have a phone, you scroll through social media, and that's how you talk to your friends, right? You don't actually go out and see. You don't go to their house and knock on their door. You
Yeah.
don't visit the neighbors. You have a phone, you have social media, you have their numbers, and you plan stuff out, or you just text. And it's like you're so isolated and you're restricted to the computer or your phone or whatever, and it's like you don't even realize you're so isolated until you turn off the phone or computer. And it's yeah, I think that's one of the major ways it's been damaging to humans.
Yeah, that's
And
called
I also think
social displacement. That's what they call that.
social displacement, that's very professional.
Yeah. But there's some
And I think
research that shows that that is kind of like not really the biggest problem with it so much. I've actually looked into this a little bit, like social media causing problems for people mentally and their mental health. And I don't know if you were about to go into this, but one of the big ones is like online like body image problems and like people
oh
comparing
yeah,
each other in various different ways to each other. So it's like
I just think
basically
jealousy.
the technology has produced a new arena for this kind of social competition, social like eating each other to happen. So I don't even know if that is inherent to the technology, because I think the culture just seeped into it as a sort of vessel for that to
Well, I
take a new
think this
form.
sort of I think this sort of communitarian competitiveness has always been in human communities, but I think it's sort of it's sort of shifted over from the real world to the digital world in a sort of like huge, like distorted way, and so it's much more vivid and it's much more large scale, and I think I think it's always been there. It's just distorted and enhanced here.
Yeah.
But I mean, and yeah, and another major problem with it as well, and I think that also kind of ties into it. It's just like feelings of inferiority, right? I mean, that's always going to happen. You're always going to be jealous, but I think social media takes that to the next level with constant stimulation and constant exposure to this kind of stuff. And it can cause, and especially since kids are major users of social media, I think this is causing a lot of uh, like depression in kids. We can even see this, right?
Yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of kids are becoming more and more depressed, and I think it's having huge effects on children's psychology as they grow up. And they're going to
Not
grow up to
only
be
that,
weird, and they're going to be broken.
not only this, but like how technology and screens affect your sleep patterns. It literally keeps you awake. Like it literally can turn people into insomniacs. Like they want you to be on this all the time.
I experienced this like the other week. Yeah, I know it's just so weird, but
And
I mean,
that was one of the things that the research shows, like that's one of the worst effects of social media is it literally just destroys your sleep. Like
yeah, I think that's a much more biological problem. But yeah, that is one of the very many bad like detriments to the human body. But I also think there's a lot of psychological or I guess yeah, sleep also can
yeah.
damage your psychological state. But yeah, and also just like not even digital stuff, but just I think the medical field also I think is also really harmful to humans and their biology. I think it sort of creates a sanitized place where we have no room to immunize ourselves or become healthier. Instead, we're focused on treating it after the fact instead of preventing these things, if you get what I mean.
That's an interesting point of view.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't matter what kind of healthcare system it is. It's like that's the point of it. It's to fix the problems that industrialism caused in the first place, causing even more problems. But yeah,
Yes, like even with like mental health apparatuses, like I see it as like there's all these jobs being created, all these career paths being carved out for like picking up the pieces that capitalism or whatever you want to call like the status quo has broken. And then all they do, or one of the things that they do most of the time is they can even cause more damage and they just get paid for that. Like that becomes their living.
exactly. And there's so many kids under the age of I think it was like 6 years old that are on Adderall, and it's like that's a apparently it's a viable solution to some things. And it's just like, do you know how many other problems that you're going to cause that's way worse than the one you're trying to fix right now?
Yeah,
And
like all
it's
of the
like
overdiagnoses and
the
the fact that
logic in it.
deviant behavior is medicalized. You know what I mean? Like
I know. Have you ever read John Taylor Gatto?
no, I haven't.
He wrote a really good book. He wrote a few books. Uh, I read one about the institution of schooling a while back. It's called Weapons of Mass Instruction.
Ooh.
It's a really good book. It's all about how the sort of the industrial school system was put in place and what it was meant to do, and how they sort of subordinate kids into like a permanent state of uh, domestication to the school through medication, through I don't like through making them sit in 8 hours in a classroom is going to change them enough. But yeah, it's a really good book. I'd recommend you check it out.
That is interesting, and I definitely will. I like
Yeah.
these kind of like, because Foucault did a lot of work on these kind of institutional questions. Like, I'm interested in critiquing society as we know it more than a lot of these leftists that parade around the internet, it seems.
You got to troll a status quo. That's the only way to get back at it.
Yeah.
Don't do too much trolling though. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and also I feel like one more thing, and I feel like with education as well. I think you talked about homeschooling. Uh, I feel like homeschooling is, or at the very least, community schooling is probably one of the most natural and most healthy ways a kid can learn about life. Apprenticeship being another one of those. But yeah, I feel like public school systems are are the very opposite of what you want for your kid. But yeah, I definitely think homeschooling and community schooling is the way to go. It should be much more widely encouraged.
Well, how do you see this more broadly or specifically even? Because like I basically see it as it's a little factory where they produce the types of subjects that they want and they produce little workers. They make you into a little obedient worker drone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think it produces. I wrote something really. I'm writing a sort of overall critique of modernity in industry, and I think I wrote something about this. It sort of a creates a pet, right? And it creates a pet that's really well trained,
Yeah.
and it can do all these different things as long as you pay it enough, right? But I feel like it also creates, especially with overpopulation as well, it sort of creates this excess. At least that's what they see it as, this excess of people that are just leeches, and it creates them in absurd quantities. And I feel like all these people who like have no place in life because they were not good for school. I feel like they're increasing in numbers, and they're increasing numbers faster and faster and faster. And I feel like that's also another thing to watch out for.
Maybe their discontentment and sort of like marginalism can be radicalized. That's what I'm
I
thinking.
don't.
But
I mean, I don't think that. I think we should see them as people who have been deeply, deeply hurt by the status quo. I don't think we should look at their ideas necessarily literally, um, or we shouldn't take them and accept them or try to expand on them. I think we should see what's happened and learn from it. And yeah, I don't know.
well, I feel like I don't know. I like to see these kind of people who are damaged by the status quo as potential ways of fighting it. Cuz I identify with that kind of like life, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if I could ever. I mean, I was not very good in high school. I mean, I wasn't too bad. I don't know. But I'm in college right now, and I don't know. I don't feel like I can identify with that sort of outcast, but I could definitely see where you come from and your values. And yeah, I don't know. And I feel like there's lots of other kinds of people, of excess people. And it's like, I mean, you have criminals, you have, you know, homeless people. And I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's different kinds. And I feel like you can empower these kind of people to sort of, as you say, sort of start a counter revolution against the status quo, not necessarily through building on the ideas that they espouse, but sort of rallying them up against the very system that put them in the situation in the first place. Specifically, like poor people or homeless people or people who need to get into crime to survive.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of overlapping kind of systems of oppression that contribute to that kind of thing and keep boots that keep people down like this. But the thing about the education point as well is it's so fucked up how the more education you get, the deeper you go into the little worker drone factory, the better a job you will attain. So you actually have to do it in order to survive and like better your status in society.
Unless you take the path that a lot of people have taken, and you buy a little plot of land and you just go off the grid, and that's what a lot of people have done if they don't want to live that kind of life. But it takes some effort. But once you're there, you're there.
And even then, you have to buy land. Like, all of these economic incentives are kind of like.
Well, if you live in a rural area, or if you live near a rural area, I mean, land is not that expensive, especially for one person. But
Yeah, but
that's why most rural area people are very much like on the poor side. Like they couldn't afford a house, but they could afford to build a house on a plot of land.
right, yeah. But, like, there's so many people who are crammed up in cities and deep in the cities. And I'm sure you hate cities. Like,
I live in the city and I hate it, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I see and those people probably would not be able to get out and would probably require some help. And that's the thing. I also think uh, help should also be given to people who want to live, independent of it or don't want to live uh, in urban areas. But I also think those kind of people should take that opportunity of living in that area to sort of bring awareness. I don't want to sound like a reformist, but I do think bringing awareness to sort of just the overall environmental disaster and sort of psychological consequences that our lifestyles are having on us can uh, bring people who can live off the grid or at least live independently sort of consider that, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
And I think as many
Mm,
people, if the more people that do it, the more cogs are being removed from the machine as well. So
interesting, yeah. How do you feel about the idea? There's this concept that infrared, it's in one of their videos, and they basically describe it's like a Heideggerian kind of idea that like the fundamental character of human being in society is like the worker who like farms, actually works on the land, and then like the people who basically grow the food that everybody eats, like the people who really have a deep connection to the land itself and like build their families around this kind of like way of life. They say that that is like the fundamental feature, that is the fundamental wheel that all societies inevitably depend on. How do you feel about that concept? I feel like that would appeal to you.
I haven't. I mean, this is the first time I'm kind of hearing about it, but I think it's pretty spot on. But I don't think all humans are necessarily meant to be farmers. I think if your community is well established, I think there's room for blacksmiths, butchers, stuff like that, hunters. But I do think there is some sort of essential role that these agrarian people will always play in human society, no matter where it goes. It could be Star Trek, the year 2500. People who work in agriculture will always be dependent on, and will probably be one of the most important lines of work that you could have.
And it's so frustrating because, like, in the weird, bizarro, like, simulacra political situation that we have in America right now, people who are, like, supposedly on the left and, like, liberals, they spit on those people. They hate them. They literally look down on them as ignorant and deplorable. Like,
It's because people who live in Americans who live in rural areas typically are lower class because they're poor, and adhere to values that, like, socially conservative values that are definitely very much outside of the status quo.
But it's
And so
such
upper
a
class white liberals will
yeah,
spit on.
and it's such a cruel sort of contradiction because those kinds of urbanite people, they are the ones who are like, oh yeah, progressive values, like that. But those people that they're spitting on are people that, if they actually had a clear view of the situation, they would count them as members of the oppressed. But they don't have that analysis.
It's because they're just comfortable enough. Like I said, they're just
Yeah,
comfortable enough
yeah.
to be content with their situation. But yeah, and I think that was purposefully created to have a subordinate sort of middle class majority. But yeah, I don't know. That's another topic. But
Do you think that that
yeah,
is like one of the sort of inhibitive features of democracy as we know it?
I think democracy. I don't value democracy as something that should be upheld.
Yeah, I've moved away from that as well. Like when I first got into like anarchism, I was very much like direct democracy, like amogus meetings, like we all have to vote on every single thing. And now I'm kind of like, but if we sublate the current state of things and we actually abolish the state machinery, that would not be democratic. Like there would be no democracy left. Like you know what I mean? Like
Exactly. The will of the masses. That's another Enlightenment concept that I'm really, really not a fan of. It's the sort of idea that the people under a king or queen have the right to decide what he or she decides. It's such a weird Enlightenment idea that's founded on pretty much nothing other than freedom and no government, free markets, whatever. And it's I don't know. It's such a strange concept to me. It's like it's not like unlike communism or fascism or whatever. It's like it's grounded on some weird what is it? It's like a collectivistic utilitarian shadow of an idea. I don't know.
yeah, I see what you're saying. I think.
Yeah, yeah. I sometimes I just like add a bunch of descriptions to it, hoping that it makes more sense, but it ends up not making any sense at all. But
I mean, everybody kind of does that online, but
yeah, I don't know. I mean, democracy also, it's like it sort of springs from the idea that it springs from peasant revolts and stuff like that, sort of empowering that idea that peasants have any right to like decide what the royal family does, and it's sort of won over. I mean, and it set up the circumstances for the Industrial Revolution. But I also, yeah, I think it sort of allows for degeneracy and the rulership of the I'm not going to say the R word here, but rulership of the ignorant. And I think it just sort of leads us down a path of uh, it leads us down a path towards a hellhole nation state, with a subordinate middle class like we have today. But
okay. Well, I mean, that's an interesting kind of take on the whole development, but do you want to
it's
leave it
very,
here or
yeah, I mean, oh damn, it's been an hour already. I thought it was like 20 minutes. I
no?
didn't look at the time. Yeah, I like go on rants and stuff, and I'll like not know where I'm going with it, and
Yeah, I
I'll
thought we were
yeah,
going to be like arguing more than we did, but no.
yeah, we just ended up trashing liberals and talking about how bad school is.
Based.
Yeah, I mean, anytime I'd like to come back on, and I don't know, maybe I can debate, Les or someone. I don't know.
Yeah, if they ever come back, God.
If they, yeah, I don't know, or Road Cone. I haven't debated him in a while.
That
I
would
don't
be
know.
so funny. We should set that up because that would be fun.
Let's set it up. I challenge you to a debate.
Do it right after this. You should send it into the channel
Oh
and we
my
can do
god.
something.
I'll have to schedule it for another time.
All
But
right. Okay. That's fine.
thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, of course. It was great.
You know, thank you very much. And guys, make sure to like and subscribe, turn on notifications, and
Based.
remember to grab your. I can't say that. I was gonna say grab your Molotov, but I'm gonna get you banned. Yeah. All right. Well. All right. I'm gonna head to bed now. I don't know. It's 11:08. Yeah.
All right. See ya.
All right. See ya.
That was great. That was great. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. And see you next week for another.